Good evening, everyone. When the computer loads up, I'll be able to tell you what I was supposed to say. But anyway, welcome to this wonderful occasion, celebrating the life of a dear friend, husband, brother, uncle, and we want to celebrate this wonderful life that was Bill Broughton. My name is Barry Gotts, and it's my pleasure to MC this evening's proceedings. To Jan, Bruce, Chrissy, Neil and their children, Matthew and Amanda, Peter, Melody and Michael, we extend our deepest sympathies, and we're here for you tonight. We'd also like to welcome some special guests in the band. We have Randy Stilwell, who's now living in New South Wales. We'll forgive him for that. But he's playing in the band tonight, and Randy was a lifelong friend of Bill's. And I bring some greetings also from other people. From Ron Trussing, the principal trombonist from the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. He wishes he could be here tonight, but he is playing Star Wars in the Opera House. Also Russell Gray, who is a very good friend of Bill's. We bring greetings from Russell and Marika as well. Tonight we are privileged to hear some of the wonderful music that Bill produced, not only in this wonderful venue, but throughout the world via the internet, with Tim Kelly and his crew from brassband.com. We appreciate your generosity, Tim, and thank you very much for being here tonight. The march that you've heard, the Santanian, was written in 1970. It was for bandmaster G. Stanley Harrison at the Santa Ana Corps in California. And it was also featured in the Hollywood Tabernacles Band Tour of Australia in 1972. Although never published, it has remained a favourite of Salvation Army and secular bands. I would now like to invite Captain David Collinson to open our evening in prayer.
Shall we pray? Lord, tonight we want to thank you for the gift of music and for the way music blesses us, the way it moves us, and for the way you use so many of your servants to write, conduct, and write music. And Lord, tonight we thank you especially for the life of Bill Broughton, for the influence he's had on so many of us, for the way you've used his gift to inspire others, to bless others, and to empower others to do your work, your mission on this earth. So tonight, Lord, as we gather to celebrate his life, we want to acknowledge you as Saviour and Lord of Bill's life and also of our life. And as we play music that brings honour to you, bring glory to you, Lord, we just pray that you'll accept our worship and it will just bring a real blessing to everyone here this evening. So we thank you for Bill and thank you for this opportunity to play music inspired by you. We pray in your name. Amen. Amen. It's a real privilege to be part of this event, and Bill was a man that inspired me, like so many of us here this evening. And my original memories, of course, like many, go back to Spiritual of the Bone. And he arrived in Australia and we had album number 1 and then album number 2, and we got excited because album number 3 came out and we collected them, and many of us trombone players tried to play some of the parts with or without the music and had various luck with that. But he was an amazing man and a charismatic figure and a great encourager, I must admit. He encouraged me on numerous times. Although I could never play as well as Bill, he was always very, very kind with his words. And it's my real privilege tonight to play a trombone solo written by Bill called Take Up Thy Cross. It's based on a beautiful hymn of the Christian church. And the words of the chorus go, "Take up thy cross and follow him. I hear thy blessed Saviour call. How can I give a lesser sacrifice when Jesus gave his all?" It's quite a short number, but a beautiful piece of music arranged by Bill. And I pray that you'll be blessed as you listen to this. Thank you.
Thank you, David and the band. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Raymond, who will sing a lovely arrangement of Now I Belong to Jesus. This arrangement was originally written for Dave Boyer, quite a famous Christian singer in the United States, but it has been featured by Rebecca on a number of occasions. Thank you.
Jesus, my Lord, will love me forever. From him no power of evil can sever. He gave his life to ransom my soul. Now I belong to him. But for eternity. But for eternity. Oh, joy floods my soul, for Jesus has saved me, freed me from sin that long had enslaved me. His precious blood he gave to redeem. A day or a year, he who has ears, let him hear. It's for eternity.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's a great chart, doesn't it? Really swings. Great stuff. When my family and I moved to Los Angeles in 1983 and I met Bill and we struck up this friendship, he was most adamant that I should meet his brother Bruce. And I was quite in awe of this upcoming lunch date because I'd held Bruce in the very high esteem as a composer. We'd played a lot of his music at Sydney Congress Hall and since done as well. And the first hearing, The Good Old Way with the Hollywood Tabernacle Band many years ago. I'd like to invite Bruce to the microphone as he brings a tribute.
Well, I can say that I knew Bill longer than anybody in this room. And I, believe it or not, I even remember when he was born. Bill and I were very close in age. We were actually only 18 months apart. But in spite of that, I know that it's my first probably my first real memory of my father pointing out the hospital where my mother was with my new baby brother. Since that time, it was quite a ride. Bill started life not like you would probably, if any of you who knew Bill, and I assume that most of you knew Bill since you're here, you know, Bill was very outgoing, and he liked to take the stage, and he liked to, you know, be friendly and be with people and all that sort of thing. But as a baby, he had a kind of a quick start. He was 3 weeks early. I was 3 weeks late. If you know our personalities, that explains a lot. But in spite of that, his first several months, from what I understand from my aunt, said that he wouldn't talk. He would just sort of lie in his bassinet or his whatever it is they lie in, and just look. You just look and listen. And I sort of think now that it was Bill just taking in the world, because there wasn't much of his life that I remember after that where he ever just sat around and looked and didn't talk. Our parents were Salvation Army officers, and we did a lot of traveling. And we did traveling in days when there was no air conditioning in the cars, and we couldn't afford good cars, so Bill and I were always in the back seat, usually fighting. But when we wanted to relax and have a really good time, we made up this really incredible game called Joe. And one of us would usually say to the other, "Hey, Bill," or "Hey, Bruce, you want to play Joe?" And the other person would always say, "Yeah, sure." And the game went like this. "So what do you think, Joe?" "I don't know, Joe. What do you think?" "Well, I don't know, Joe." I mean, the whole game was just call the other guy Joe. It was a really stimulating game, right? And I kind of went on for that. So my grandfather, not the composer, but the other one, had read somewhere that when a child, if you have siblings, and one of them is successful in something, the other one should not be encouraged to do the same thing as the successful one was. Well, I was older, and I had already started taking piano lessons, and somebody had shoved a trumpet in my hand because there was a Salvation Army thing. The trumpet didn't go so well, but the piano went really well. And so my grandfather, in his wisdom, bought my brother a marimba, because certainly nobody in the family played a marimba. In fact, nobody we knew played a marimba. And after a few lessons, Bill's marimba teacher talked to my dad, took him aside, and suggested that he sell the marimba. He said, "This kid's not going to be a marimba player." So Bill, you know, for a time, he was kind of interested in playing the drums and all that kind of stuff. And then, these are very good notes, by the way, whoever wrote them. Very good notes about Bill's life. But when Bill came across the trombone, it was really a love affair. And it's true what it says in here. The international staff band came to town, and we're playing, and John Cobb, the trombone player, got up and played the Eternal Quest. And Bill was just knocked sideways. Now, you know, as a budding composer, I thought it was a pretty cool piece, but Bill thought it was a really cool piece. And he and John Cobb, who was the trombone player, became really lifelong friends. It turns out that my wife, who's not a Salvationist, didn't grow up in it, also knew John Cobb, because she knew John as being the administrator for the London Philharmonic Orchestra many years later. But all through this, Bill and John stayed in touch. And with that inspiration, Bill, it said here he bought some Arbin books. That's true, but he bought not the trombone books. Arbin is the theoretical books you buy to make you really strong. All the etudes and all the exercise and things. So there's a trombone version and there's a trumpet version. So Bill never learned the trombone version. He just played the trumpet version. He had a tremendous technique. And I remember as kids, of course I used to accompany him all the time. As kids, he practiced a lot. He played and played and played, and he practiced and he practiced, and he worked hard. He wasn't, I mean, he didn't come out of the womb as a great trombone player. He really had to practice it. And one of the stupid things that happened to him in high school was he had played in a high school talent contest, and he came in second. And the guy who was the judge told Bill afterwards that the reason he came in second was because he was a natural talent, obviously, but the guy who got the prize had to work for what he had done. So that was sort of like, you know, that wasn't a lot of fun. So Bill eventually ended up back in Los Angeles, where we all started, where we were all born, and got into the movies. Now, this gives you an idea of what Bill actually did. And I think sometimes Bill did so many things, and he's talked about it so much, that people think that he was really exaggerating. Actually, I would say this isn't even half of the things that Bill did. Bill was one of the guys that everybody called to play trombone on their sessions. People still talk about him. I think, in fact, I said to him a couple of months ago, I said, you know, I think you worry too much that you've been forgotten in Los Angeles. You haven't been forgotten. I said, the only trouble is that a lot of people that you played with have died. You know? And he said, oh, okay, oh, I understand that. Which is really the truth. But he was a tremendous player in the studios and had his sound on many, many, many soundtracks. And he played with, you know, big names like Frank Sinatra and Lalo Schifrin, who some of you know. And Lalo Schifrin was the guy who wrote the Mission Impossible theme. And Lalo was a good friend of Bill's. Lalo would talk to me about him. So Bill did a bunch of stuff like this. Years later, he got a chance to write the music for this theme restaurant that was based upon the Rocky and Bullwinkle TV series. Unfortunately, the restaurant didn't go too far, but Bill did. And Bill wrote all the music, and he got the people who did the original voices, and he wrote the scripts, and he took some of the character jobs on him. I mean, Bill, these are things, believe me, I would never, never, never have done. But Bill was up for it. I mean, Bill loved to perform, whether it was on his trombone or whether he was just singing goofy songs or whether he was up talking to people. Bill is also a great motivator. One of the things I've noticed and been very touched by over the last couple of weeks are the number of emails and letters I've had, not just of condolences, which you sort of expect, but of the sort of the testimonials of people saying how powerful Bill was in their lives, how inspirational he was, how meaningful he was. And I mean meaningful in the sense that people would say, without his encouragement, I wouldn't have become what I became, right? I wouldn't have learned to do what I needed to do. I wouldn't become the person that I became. I was really moved by that because this was something that Bill really believed in. He was very, very good with people, but he was very good at encouraging people. He could be snarky. I remember one time he was playing on a session with Elmer Bernstein, some movie, and he didn't like the music. And he said to the guy sitting next to him, who he didn't know, a kid playing bass trombone, says, "This piece stinks." This is just a rotten piece. Well, it turned out that the kid had written it. And what that meant was, and Bill got this immediately, the kid had written it as a ghostwriter for the ghostwriter who was writing for Elmer. So it was like you know, second degree, something like that. So Bill, still being snarky, said, "Oh, so you got this job as payment for the piece, right?" And the guy said, "Well, yeah." And Bill said, "You know how much you would have made had you actually gotten paid for it?" The kid said, "No." So Bill counted the number of musicians in the orchestra, and he figured out how many pages, how many lines that was. I mean, what the fee would have been for the union wages. And he figured out how many pages it would have been, and it turned out it was like 3 or 4 times what the kid was going to make playing bass trombone. Bill could do that. He wouldn't do it a lot, because basically he would help people up and he would help them out. But you know, Bill had, let's just say Bill had range. I will say without a doubt that some of the happiest years, if not the happiest years of his life, were spent right here in Australia. He was very happy in Australia. He had many friends here. He would tell me about his friends all the time and talk about them. He was extraordinarily lucky to meet Jan. I would thank Jan right now publicly for making his life so wonderful. Every time I called Bill in Australia, he was in a good mood. Now, maybe you always saw him in a good mood. Maybe you thought that he was always in a good mood. Let me tell you, no. I mean, not at all. But when he was in Australia, he was in a good mood. He loved it here. He loved the people here. He was happy to take citizenship. He did a lot of work here. I know that they were really the best years and probably the most fulfilling years of his life. And so, as I say, I thank Jan and her family and all of you who made that possible. Chrissy, I'm going to embarrass you. Could you stand up for a second? I'd like to introduce you to my brother's oldest daughter, Chrissy, who came out to be here. One of the hardest things for Bill, of course, was to be away from his kids. He has three kids. Chrissy is the oldest. She has a sister, and then a brother, David, who was here when Bill died. I've always liked the idea of promoted to glory. It's a funny phrase. It's an arcane phrase. It's a kind of a goofy phrase. It's a very typical Salvation Army phrase, and people like my wife don't get it at all. But I always thought it was rather charming that you actually got promoted to glory. Years ago, I was working on a cowboy and Indian show over at MGM. And you know, the cowboys and Indians are shooting each other, and there's this big battle, and some Indian falls to the ground. And I turned to the music director and I said, you know where I came from? That Indian just got promoted to glory. He thought that was funny. Well, with Bill, I have to say, I think he probably was promoted to glory. And I don't know who deserves each other better, whether glory deserves him more or Bill deserves glory more. He was a cool guy, and I miss him. I'll miss him a lot. Thank you for being here.
This next piece, I Am Coming Lord, was originally written by Bill for him to feature as a soloist. But on the day it was to be performed, he couldn't play. He just wasn't well enough. So he decided on the time to switch it to the flugelhorn. He liked it so much it remained that way ever since. Don is going to come and play the flugelhorn solo, and the band is going to be conducted by Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks, Don, very much. Now, Bill did have a sense of humour, and it often came out in the music that he wrote. And this is a tongue-in-cheek approach to a very familiar song, Every Day with Jesus. when Bill was living in Atlanta, he was often asked to write music for special occasions. His next piece is entitled A-OK. Well, in Australia, that may mean she's right, mate. But in the southern states of the United States, it is Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Well, here are some tunes that make that area of the world very familiar. Very shortly after Bill died, I got a phone call from London asking that I write a tribute that could be published in the British Bandsman. So I'm going to read that to you tonight, and there are one or two anecdotes that I can share. I had just finished watching the faculty members of the Brisbane Low Brass weekend paying tribute to Bill by performing his work When He Calls Me Home. At the opening of their concert, it reminded me of the worldwide influence Bill had. His ever-bright demeanour, his ability to remember people's names, His encouraging and motivational presence extended far into the hearts of the people he met. One story, I was at Starlight Camp in 1986 and Bill followed me in 1987. Within a day, he knew every camper by name. That's an amazing feat. And he was just that sort of person. He would greet everybody by name. It was wonderful. I first met Bill when my family moved to Los Angeles in 1983. He had a studio in Glendale where he was producing music for the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. I can share with Bruce that he knew everything about that show. In fact, he could do all the voices himself. But he was very good friends with Bill and June, who were the main characters of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And it was just fantastic. It's a pity that some of the music hasn't been allowed to be published because it's very fine writing. And a lot of that today you just heard in Every Day with Jesus, because he knew how to write cartoon music really well. We became friends very quickly, and we had many a lunch and discussion regarding professional and church music, particularly the Salvation Army repertoire. We both came from a rich tradition involving 3 continents, and we had many mutual acquaintances. Bill's involvement in the commercial scene, having been a successful trombonist, composer, arranger and producer, brought a rich knowledge from which I was eager to glean. His ballad playing was exceptional, and many of his brother Bruce's movie and television scores featured that golden tone. I remember particularly The Concierge. That was a wonderful moment of Bill playing in there. He had a wonderful golden tone, as we know. It's amazing to realise that all his playing was still on a small Bach 16. And I asked him once why he stuck with that, because modern trombonists play these huge symphonic trombones. He said, I just do it. You know, it doesn't matter what the gig is, I just play it on my trombone. You adapt to the job at hand, his words were, and it's so true. Bill and his family attended the Pasadena Corps for a period of time, and Bill played in the band. He requested to play second trombone because actually he wanted to encourage the younger people on top who were playing first. And he genuinely enjoyed the part. He liked 5th and 6th position. Very odd character. He was the featured soloist on the band's tour to the Midwest. On one occasion, we were in Elyria, Ohio, which is just south of Cleveland. And the officer at the Corps was a single officer, and she had worked so hard to get a crowd in this high school auditorium. It was nearly full. So she'd asked all the community, and one particular supporter was the mayor. Now, the mayor was an interesting character because he came to the concert slightly under the weather. And I had discussed with Bill prior to the concert, we should try to do something a little different in this concert. And he said, well, I could do the Spike Jones version of Fly the Bumblebee. Don't tell the band, we just do the routine. So we did. Well, it was a great hit, wonderful hit. And the mayor just thought it was fantastic. He came out of his chair and almost fell on the floor. Oh, it's great, wonderful. And everybody applauded, of course. Anyway, in the second half of the program, Bill had another solo to play. Peter Graham had written a wonderful version of I Walked Today Where Jesus Walked. Well, when Bill stood up to play, the mayor said, oh, it's that funny guy again! And then a rather awkward moment ensued. Bill took it in his stride and played magnificently, setting up a wonderful moment in the concert, one that I will never forget. Bill and his family moved to Atlanta, where he continued to compose and arrange many events, and one highlight was to compose for the 1986 Paralympics. His involvement with Spiritual to the Bone was a far-reaching project. His arrangements were always a feature, and his playing was exceptional. In 2003, Bill moved to Australia, and in 3 years later became an Australian citizen. He continued to compose for all types of ensembles and was often asked to adjudicate at contests in the Stedfords throughout the country. He was a member of the Mount Gambier Generations of Jazz faculty and was a part-time lecturer at Adelaide University Elder School of Music. He's played with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, and it was wonderful to have him play with the Queensland Pops when I was its director. the South Brisbane Federal Band in Brisbane benefited by his expertise, by he would adjudicate the composers' competition, and many a composer has benefited from his experiences. Because of his interest in people, Bill was a motivational speaker, and he authored books to assist people in their journey. His deep spiritual beliefs were his foundation, and his service to God was always present. He was a registered celebrant and officiated at many weddings and other events. In 2016, Bill was elected President of the National Band Council of Australia, a position which I find privileged to now hold, and as a continuation of that wonderful job. I'm still not quite sure what it means, but at least I'm still finding out. But hopefully the experiences that Bill shared and that I can continue on will mean a lot. His many achievements are chronicled in the archive of the internet and in the many compositions and recordings that remain in circulation around the world. And if you want to hear a few, Jan's brought some CDs tonight, and they'll be for sale afterwards. I'm sure she doesn't want to take any home. $5 each will get you a real tribute to Bill. In recent years, Bill's health deteriorated, and as it got worse, his only concern was that he was not able to continue his writing and composing. I was with him a couple of months ago, and he was quite weak. But, you know, he loved Jan so much. And all I can say is every time I talked to him, the conversation would always turn to Jan and how much she had done for him. He just felt so happy here in Australia, and particularly in South Australia. My heart goes out to you and the family. All I can say is well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. The band's going to play It Is Well With My Soul, and Bruce has a few words to say.
Bill, of course, was a great friend and a great musician, but he's a great encourager, as we've heard tonight. Whenever anybody had a hassle of any sort, Billy liked to be there to help. And he certainly did for me when I had a difficult time and I was in hospital. And he got the Kensington Ord Band, which I was conducting at the time, on a Monday night, I think it was. And he wrote this work and said, I've dedicated this to you, Bruce. And I heard it a few months later and had the pleasure of conducting it a few times. It's a beautiful arrangement. Thanks, Bill, for giving us this arrangement. Just before you come out, Barry, I remember when Bill said to me, I would love to meet your friend James Morrison. And I said, I think James would like to meet you, Bill. You have a lot in common. I spoke to James, he's just flown back from France, he's off to America again tomorrow. I remember the day that I met Bill. He was so enthusiastic, so passionate, so giving of himself, that I felt after the conversation as though I'd been given some kind of gift. The funny thing is, every time I spoke with Bill, over many years, it was exactly like that, just like the first time. He never wavered. He never lost any of his amazing energy and willingness to do everything that he could to contribute in any way possible. Billy loved the trombone. He loved to write. He loved to conduct. He loved music. But most of all, he loved people. Well, mate, I know you're listening, and we love you too. It's common to say when a friend leaves this world that they'll be missed. And while that's true, when it comes to Bill, James said, I'd rather say, you'll be remembered, mate. A tribute from James Morrison.
Originally written for the Southern Territorial Band of the Salvation Army, Bill's arrangement of Deep River became a great favourite and still is today. It was liked so much that Bill decided to write it also for Spiritual to the Bone. So would you greet the band as they play Deep River? Following that, Howard will bring a tribute.
Well, tonight it's my privilege to perhaps fill you in a little bit on why Bill was actually here in Australia. And we've heard some of the polished moments of Bill, or we've seen some very funny unpolished moments as well. For those of you who don't know, Bill came, well, it's an adventure really. I guess it was adventure. And it started back for us when Sharon and I in 1994 went to Steve Buller's studio in Maryland. Sharon was recording her second album with Stephen, and Bill had been engaged, glasses are good, arranged 6 of the 12 songs. As it happens, we only had one phone call, but something seemed to twig. Up until 1994, the Broughton name really didn't mean anything to me. It was a name in the corner of a piece of music. I'd never heard of Bill's achievements, let alone heard him play, and boy was I in for a treat. The friendship grew quickly in 1997 when we toured Spiritual to the Bone throughout Australia and New Zealand. Besides a love of music, Bill and I quickly discovered the love of a little bit of, well actually no it wasn't, it was a heck of a lot of fun, and many funny moments came our way. To hear Bill play was to hear the trombone croon those beautiful ballads. As we travelled, we certainly stood out, well he stood out to me as the all-round musician. His arranging, compositions, and as a virtuoso trombonist, I really felt we need to hear more of this in Australia. So the discussion started, and the possibility of him coming back to tour was right at the top of the cards. So keen was Bill, he came back in 98 and 2000, where we toured from Adelaide to Brisbane on the East Coast as a solo performer and with brass bands and giving master classes at schools and community brass seminars. Now the funny part to that, we went to one school that really stands out, and I know it did to Bill as well. We went to this boys' college just out of Sydney. He was a bit out of sorts that day. He wasn't feeling all that flash, and he wasn't sure why. But he said, "No, it's all right. No worries. It'll sort itself out when we got started." And you know what he was like with people. He lit up beautifully. Well, he always liked to start with Flight of the Bumblebee or Czarist, and he was going to smack him between the nose, and that always got them every time. Well, he did. He stepped up, let rip, and there was Czarist. It was going like a train. The boys responded accordingly. There was whoops and yelps and "you beauty, that's fantastic, and you're doing great." And they all clapped like crazy. And it went beaut, and Bill stood back and he had done his piece, and it was great. And he said, "That song is called Czarist." And right up the back, there was a kid right up the back corner. And he said, "No, it's not Czarist, it's Czarist." And Bill took his glasses off and he looked up and he looked back again. And he said, "It's Czarist. I've been playing it for years." And he was already a bit narky anyway, as you had said before, Bruce, he can be that way. And this kid said, "I'm sorry, it is Russian." And the poor kid had bands as well, and he was really struggling. And he said, "No, I have won 2 awards before I got here in Hungary, and it's Czarist. I've done." And the teacher saying, "Look, sit down, just sit down." And poor old Bill's getting a little bit narky, to say the least. Anyway, he got the fellow to be quiet, and it went along beautifully. It was travelling quite nice, and this little kid sitting in the corner, he's a bit cheesed off because he hadn't been able to say what he wanted to say. Bill was sort of watching to the side, but he was all right, went through, and some little fella down the front said, "I sort of understood, Mr. Broughton, that you go under the name of, you were introduced as Bill Broughton, but you actually, in your write-up, says William Broughton. Now, is there a problem with that? What you preferred being called?" And Bill said, "Well," he said, "it doesn't really matter. You can call me either of the two." He said, "In times gone past, I've been called Billy." And he said, "But that's in the past." Anyway, this kid sits up the back and stands straight up, and he says, "What about Big Billy. And Bill's ears just went, he didn't know where to go next. He said, what about I stick my boot in your backside, in your tushy, that was the word, in your tushy, and I send you all the way back to Hungary. And he couldn't. Anyway, so after a while, it wasn't one of Bill's highlights. He called out. I tell you what it was for me, because it was very, very funny. So after that, and suggestions from the teachers that it's not actually the booting someone is not the way, a good mode of transport. We wandered back to the car, and all the way back, all you could hear Bill saying, "Yes! Got it! Who's got it? Yes!" And the word Big Willie weren't spoken much after that either. That was kept to us. Yes or not, Bill still wanted to move to Australia. And in 2002, started the progress of getting a visa. We tried a number of angles, but things just didn't come together as quick as Bill would have liked. Someone then came up with the wonderful idea of distinguished artist, musician, sportsman visa. With wonderful help and a lecturer's position on offer from Bruce Hancock at the Jazz Department at the Adelaide Conservatorium, Bill received his visa. Over this time, Bill had moved in with us until he could afford a house of his own. The kids had accepted Uncle Bill as part of the family, and his life as an Aussie had begun. As it happened, he had the last bedroom in the end of the hallway in our place there. As soon as the kids returned from home, he had 4 kids all singing their hearts out to 4 different songs in 4 different rooms, and that was just a little bit too much. After many attempts of trying to move them on, and telling us that it wasn't good for kids to sing in the afternoon, he decided that going for very long walks was a wonderful idea. And so he did that. Olivia and Alex often toddled off early on a Saturday morning to watch movies and eat popcorn, plus all sorts of goodies with Bill. One day he called me and he asked whether I had bug spray. I had just bought some, so I thought, I'll drop it down for you. Next day he rings again and says, do you have any more of that bug spray? And I said, I just gave you a new can. And he said, oh man, this is a big sucker. And I said, what? He said, a waspy bee thing. I can't kill it. Can you please come down? So down I go, and standing outside is Bill with a fly swat in one hand and a rubbish tin lid in the other. And he's got this thing on the ground, and it's actually died. And I said, did you squash it? He said, no, I drowned it. I said, what do you mean you drowned it? He said, I used a whole can of fly spray on it. And he's died. He's down. I know he's gone. And to this very day, you can look on the bricks of that house, and there's if you know, you empty a whole can of something on something, it goes white. Well, there's this perfect outline of a bee or a wasp or something still there, and the white mark around it where this thing had died on the ground. It was amazing. I said to him one day, Bill, you walk to the bus stop every morning and you go down to the com, and then you travel with us with everything that you do. Perhaps it'd be an idea if you went for a licence, that you actually started driving yourself and doing a few things. Perhaps you have an international licence or something like that that you can use. And he said, well, he didn't want to sit for one of the new licences because he didn't think he'd get it. And I said, well, it's probably better if you try for that licence, because 7 in a station wagon is a little crowded, and we can't strap Alex to the roof any longer than what we're doing now. So he thought, yep, perhaps that is a good idea. So he grabbed an international licence, he bought himself a car and started moving out to New Horizons. Well, I New Horizons to walk anyway. That afternoon walk he'd got into, he kept doing that, and he kept walking and walking. So he came in and he said, you know what? I think I'm going to go for a walk to Mount Lofty. I said, to Mount Lofty? He said, well, no, from Mount Lofty. I'm going to walk down Mount Lofty and go down to Mariota Falls, which is a long walk. And it is especially for someone who's just really getting into it. He said, look, I'm just wondering, what will the wildlife be like? What am I liable to see? Am I liable, going to get into trouble? Am I going to, run into something I don't like? I said, well, and of course that just was the thing we needed. Well, mate, the brown snakes there are really, really, they go across the track, and the red-belly blacks, they're much the same. And of course, kangaroos, when it's on mating season, oh no, they're always on mating season, so you could be in trouble there. It went on for a fair while, and he said, well, look, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to walk down this track. He said, I'm going to go down. I said, well, look, it's steep, and just be really careful and keep your phone on you. He said, yep, I'll do that. An hour later, I get a phone call, and it's a very meek Bill on the end of the phone. And he said, oh, Howard, I think I've broken my arm. I've fallen over, and I'm not feeling well at all. I said, okay, all right. Have you called an ambulance? He said, no, I'm not calling an ambulance. I can't afford it. I said, okay, righto. Where are you? Well, I'm in the cafe, so off we go. And I got into the cafe, and the lass at the thing says, look, you're looking for the big fella? He's over in the corner. So I went across and I said, how you doing, mate? And he only said a few words, which was quite interesting. He said, you never told me about tree roots. I told him about everything else except a tree root. Now, as it happened, we got him to hospital. He had an operation and his arm was fixed, which was terrific. In some of those stories, and believe me, there's a whole lot more stories in those early years that we cherish. And there's no way in the world that we would take the mickey out of Bill with these stories. It was a wonderful time for us. It was a time where our family opened up their doors to a fellow they didn't even know first, and they loved him. And Uncle Bill was very special in their life, as he was in ours. He was a bloke that came this way, he came to a new country, and he thrived. And you've all got different experiences with Bill at different times in that journey. And I think it's amazing how, and I'm very grateful for the plan he's put in place for us, that God does that for us. And I'm so glad he does. Because the story goes that if we hadn't met Steve Buller, we wouldn't have toured Spiritual to the Bone. And we wouldn't have met Bill, and we wouldn't have been here tonight, because that's the reason. He was a great guy, and for you, Jan, you have been magnificent. No doubt about that. And there's no doubt that you brought Bill to the fore. You brought him back to his former glory, which was wonderful. And for us, love, we just doff our cap to you. It's really great. And I can say with Sharon next to me, because we wouldn't have had him here without it, and we were fortunate to be called brother and sister to him. We're just so grateful for the time we've had. And there was something about Bill. He was just very special. Thank you. Bruce.
Thanks, Howard. Billy, of course, brought the trombone group out here, or Howard did, with Billy and Steve Buller and all the people. It was an incredible experience for all of us because they were tremendous players, and it was great to have it. We've been able to get one of the pieces, and I'm thrilled with our trombone players and all the players here. Please acknowledge them. They've just come together to play. We have a mix of Salvation Army players. We have a mix of community band players. We have Rob Beasy, back there, Rob, from Melbourne, principal cornered in the Melbourne staff band for many years. Stand up, Rob. Great to have Rob here. Travelled all the way over. Donald Main, who played the flugel, travelled all the way from Mildura and Melbourne, actually. So thanks, Donald, for doing that. And also we have our trombones who are now almost ready. We have Aaron Deanshaw, we have Dave Winnell, we have David, who played earlier for us, we have Eric on the trombone, Bartholomew, and Dave Pillane is running this for us. Thanks, Sean Duncan and Mark Ferguson, who have come along to help out with this one. Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. As Howard mentioned, when Billy first came here, sorry, William Bruce, I keep getting that wrong. When he first came here, lots of things happened and we were working to get work for him and all sorts of things, and of course Billy achieved everywhere where he went. But Mark Ferguson was part of the Conservatorium. He's now head of jazz down there, wonderful musician, and Mark is going to give a little something that he's probably written, something he's going to play, which is dedicated to Bill for tonight from the Con here in Adelaide. Thanks, Mark.
I just thought I'd say this is a song called He Is Exalted. It's a beautiful song from the Christian world, and Bill loved God, and I really wanted to acknowledge that. Obviously, I run the jazz program at the moment, but it's that connection to the spirituality is so deep, and he was such an inspiration to us. So this is a song about
There's a quote from Bill and Bruce's grandfather, who was a writer of notes, and particularly marches. But the quote says that it's much easier to play a march than to play a hymn tune well. Bill did this wonderful setting of In Perfect Peace, which the band will now play for us. to invite Bill's partner, a wonderful support to Bill, particularly in these last few months. And would you agree, please, Mrs. Jan Broughton?
I wanted this celebration of life memorial for Bill to honour him and to pay tribute to a man who, even though his was a life of ups and downs, I think he finally found his true self and was able to relax in his own skin and enjoy life without undue stress. Bill was heaven sent for me. I had 13 years as a widow raising my 4 children. But by early 2003, I realised sharply that the kids had grown up, following their own paths, and eventually I would be alone. I remember praying, Lord, send me someone for me. A crazy prayer, but a sincere one. I first saw Bill in this building. He sat alone on the band side, right about there, and he looked totally isolated. It struck me as very sad, and I remember thinking, he needs someone. I knew nothing about him, but as he came regularly to church, we chatted occasionally. He once asked me what I was doing the coming week. I said I was taking my Year 8s camping. Tents, long drop toilets, out on a farmer's paddock. He looked shocked and replied that his idea of camping was a 5-star hotel with room service. I did eventually experience staying in a 5-star hotel with Bill, but after checking out the minibar costs, I said we wouldn't bother with room service. As our friendship grew, he introduced me to his musical side. It didn't overawe me, it was just what he did. For 6 months before we were married, he wrote me journal entries. He told me he tried to write me a song, but he couldn't. So he wrote me journal entries about his thoughts and his hopes, about us. And I have about 100 pages or more of journal entries of wonderful thoughts from a very loving man. A book? Maybe. He also came to my home every afternoon for dinner from the time we were engaged until we were married, then drove back to Mount Barker every night. He didn't miss unless he was out of town working. We've already heard about Bill coming to Australia, but his entry to Australia was amazing. On reflection, he should have been deported. He came in on a one-way ticket. No job, no sponsor, not much money. The immigration department gave him a short time to rectify this, so Howard and Sharon Raymond sponsored him. He was employed by the Adelaide Conservatorium as a part-time lecturer in the jazz department. The Australian dollar was trading at 50 cents to the American dollar, so he doubled his money he brought in with him when it was converted. He was finally given permanent residency with a distinguished talent visa, mostly given to athletes, our first for a musician in South Australia. We were married on the 8th of January 2005. He moved into our home with 4 adult children. Think about that. Bill lectured at Adelaide Uni. I was teaching. We travelled, some for work and a lot for pleasure. He enjoyed meeting people and people loved talking to him. He had the most amazing stories that just gripped his listeners. Bill was an optimist. People left him feeling uplifted and inspired. We were a team, each supporting the other. He often marvelled at that, but I told him, it's just the way it's supposed to be. In 2012, we bought a property at Sanderston in a farming district. I resigned from teaching and we both enjoyed the lifestyle. Open spaces, great views, except that Bill, being a city boy, had a few obstacles to overcome. Snakes mainly. And knowing exactly where I was on the property at all times when outside, so walkie-talkies were the answer. In 2004, he had a fall and that precipitated the onset of his illness. He had been diagnosed with alpha-1 tritrypsin deficiency, a rare condition that can either affect the lungs or the liver. It affected Bill's liver. Over the coming 5 years, his illness caused him much frustration, but he was ever the optimist. The difficulties gradually increased until his doctor said that he had to stop all work and travelling and conserve his energy. He was hospitalised several times from May 2018 onward, his illness shifting into high gear and moving fast downhill. He always thought that his health would improve. Bill was able to spend time with his brother Bruce, son David and daughter Chrissy when they came to see him in February this year. He was so happy, and David was able to return to be with his dad as he died. Bill was not alone. I've experienced a marriage with a most loving and devoted husband. Bill was a romantic. From 50 red long stem roses on my 50th birthday, to handmade cards on birthdays and anniversaries, to printed posters stuck up all over the house telling me how much he loved me. Bill was a wonderful man, my friend, partner and husband whom I loved dearly. He once told me he asked his mum, what would heaven be like? As he said that if it was just harp music, he didn't know if he could stand it. His mum said, Bill, heaven is whatever you want it to be. He never told me what he wanted it to be, but whatever it's like, I'm sure it's just what he wants it to be. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have the privilege of being able to sing a song that is one of the lesser known pieces of Bill's. A beautiful, beautiful song that I was first introduced to just a few years ago, Jan, on her 50th birthday. Bill asked, would I sing this for her? He had written it some years before, but wrote an extra verse after he knew Jan. And it's an absolutely beautiful song that I know is very clearly a testimony song and very clearly his own testimony. But I'm sure that it applies to all of us. And I trust that you'll be able to see that and enjoy that tonight. Lord, you know I often try but fail you. Time and time again, sin enters in. Deep in the abyss, you still reach to me, reminding me you gave your Son to set me free. Oh, the love of God. Oh, the love of God. Mercy just for me, and His grace so rich and free. Oh, the matchless love of God. Every time I fall, I ask for mercy, praying, hoping you will understand, ready to receive all that I deserve. Then you forgive and make me clean without reserve. Oh,
His grace so rich and free. Oh, the matchless love of God. Always waiting, willing to forgive me, far beyond my finite mind can see, casting out all sin, starting me again. Your deep and unearned love, it never fails to win. Unrelenting love you give your children, far beyond the things we see or feel. You are all I need. You are everything, and all you ask of me is that my all I bring, all the love of God, all the love of God, mercy just for me, and His grace so rich and free. Oh, the matchless love of God.
And thank you, Bruce, very much for playing for me. Another one of the pieces that was requested for tonight was a beautiful song that a lot of you will know, and we're going to ask you to join in with us the second time through. At Bill and Jan's wedding 15 years ago, nearly 15 years ago, 14 years ago, we sang as a family, and one of the things that happened at the wedding was the singing a cappella of We Are Standing on Holy Ground. And Bill specifically wanted that on that day and wanted to hear it unaccompanied because he wanted to hear all the beautiful harmonies. And so we're going to, this is our daughters, Howard's and my daughters, Rebecca and Lauren and Olivia, and we sang at his wedding, and we're going to sing now We Are Standing on Holy Ground. And the second time through, please join in with us. I think the words are going up, is that right? Yes, they are.
We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us pray.
final piece the band's going to play tonight is entitled In Joyful Service. It was written for the retirement of Colonel Overstake in the Southern Territory. And Darlene Overstake, the Colonel's wife, was a very fine composer, and she had written some words and music that Bill included in this piece. It finishes with the song, For Thine is the Kingdom, and for Bill, that said it all. Well, tonight we've heard a lot about our friend Bill. His ups and downs, his good and his bad, times when he felt things difficult, but in all, a servant of God, a deeply spiritual man who encourages and encourages and encourages even in his absence. We are deeply grateful for his life. There are a couple of thank yous that I'd like to present tonight on Jan's behalf. Firstly, Howard, who has liaised with Jan in organising tonight's celebration. Thank you very much, Howard. Bruce, for so much behind-the-scenes work and conducting the band, many of whom have travelled a long way for me. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. To Sharon and the girls for singing tonight, but more importantly, opening their hearts to Bill all those years ago. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here celebrating this occasion. To Rod Carger and the Adelaide Congress Hall for opening the doors tonight so that we could use this facility. To Mark Ferguson on behalf of the Conservatorium and a good friend of Bill's, thank you, Mark. Tim Kelly and the crew from Brass Band, thanks, Tim. And we really appreciate what you do to bring banding to the world, but particularly for this occasion tonight. To Lynn and Greg Castle, your thanks as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we praise God for the gift that Bill Broughton was to us. Good night and God bless. One very important thing. The caricature that you see before you tonight was made by my wife, Jay, and I'd like to present it now to Jan to take home. Okay, I don't know you. Okay. Thank you.